These stories sometimes contain mature content and language for adult audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
If there's something that you're like, wow, this is nagging at me that I want to do this thing or try this thing, go for it. Try it. Put some thought into it. Look at strategizing how to get something off the ground, what it should look like, in your first year or so, what it could look like after that. I think that, the world really embraces people trying different things, bringing, new things to communities. Your wacky idea could become, one of the next great sports.
Welcome to Digging Deep, True Stories of Big Change. Each episode of this podcast digs deep into one person's story of change to reveal a little bit about how and why we make big changes in our lives and what can be learned from these experiences. I'm your host, Kelly Styring, founder and principal researcher from Insight Farm, a consultancy that helps companies learn from their customers and consumers through deep conversation and connection, often told as stories like the one you'll hear on this podcast. So let's get the conversation started. This episode features Kim Stegeman, A.K.A. Rocket Mean, Executive Director of the Rose City Rollers, a modern-day roller derby league in Portland, Oregon. With membership of more than 500, who knew roller derby could be such a strong force for empowerment, courage, and accessible fitness for girls, women, and gender-expansive individuals? Listen now to her fascinating story of change from corporate life while playing roller derby herself as Rocket Mean, and ultimately to executive director of one of the most strategy-driven sports organizations around. I think you'll be amazed by this story. And so I want to learn from you, in your own words, what you think your big change story is. So if you were going to write a headline or capture it in a few words, what do you think that story is?
Suppose my big change would be launching one of the biggest, baddest roller derby leagues in the world and growing it from the ground up, from a handful of friends knocking around on the track to, 500 plus skaters, 4-time reigning world champs, and, really well developed as far as the business infrastructure. I think that's been one of the secrets of the success of the Rose City Rollers is that we've always been driven by data, and we always treated Rose City Rollers like a business.
So I'd like to actually go back in time and better understand, how did you first become aware of roller derby?
Talking about modern roller derby and how I became aware of that. I didn't when we founded it. It was my friend Jeffrey Wonderful and Yvette Reyes, who basically we were at a club, and Jeffrey is a very theatrical person, did like rock operas and stuff like that. And he said, let's start a derby team. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm wonderful at skating and I would love for a reason to tackle people. And thought of it really as kind of something fun to do with friends, drink some beers, knock each other around, have a good time. When that happened, I was already aware of roller derby from having grown up working at a roller rink in my teen years, but also basically growing up as a rink rat in the, late 70s and early 80s in California. Of course, we all knew about the 70s roller derby, which was akin to wrestling, very theatric, lots of elbows and flying over the handrails and things of that nature. So I naturally had kind of a love and respect for that version of roller derby. When Jeffrey brought it up, I was just like, I'm 28 and I'd like something kind of fun and knockabout to do with my friends. Oddly enough, in 2002, Texas had started playing derby, but we didn't know about it when Jeffrey brought it up to me, which was super interesting. And then there was 28 leagues that popped up all around the US between 2002 and basically 2005.
What do you think drove the formation of all those new leagues all at once?
When I think about where a lot of these leagues kind of popped up, it's places like Portland, Oregon and Austin, Texas, where you had, populations of most of us that founded leagues were about the same age. We were in our, late 20s, early 30s. And I think a lot of us were just kind of seeking out something that was fun and rugged and us and about us and our friends. And kind of it came, I think, from, a new version of like women's empowerment. It was a matter of, that we were all, I think, kind of seeking community and we didn't know it. I can't really understand how all of us kind of came to the same idea around the same time. It was kind of miraculous.
It's kind of interesting to me how different the leagues are now, though, than that very theatrical style of the 60s and 70s. Certainly there's some theatricality, is that the right word? But not what, it's not the glamorous ladies of wrestling.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think in the beginning, a lot of us thought about having that kind of throwback. Like, I know that Jeffrey, when we started, he wanted it to be like the throwback big fights, the mistress of the penalty box and things of that nature. And like, we all kind of started out with some of that stuff. I mean, like, we had a huge dog pile fake fight in one of the first bouts. And other leagues had a lot of theatrical stuff. Like, there was a spinning wheel that you had to, if you got a penalty, you had to spin this wheel. And so in the beginning, there was a lot of that kind of focus on just really kind of giving a show as opposed to the sports side of it. And I think part of it is, when you're launching something new and you're saying, hey, world, come spend money on, a ticket, we're going to entertain you. We all kind of dove into that, right? And then we said, well, is the sport not entertaining enough? People love sports. And so I think that we kind of naturally evolved. And again, I really, really believe in, asking the audience what they want. I believe in asking my skaters what they want and, kind of figuring out where the common ground is. We were really asking, the audience, what do you love about the game? What do you love about coming to Derby? All those kind of things. And, people, I think, loved the atmosphere. They loved, the drinking beer and cheering for their favorite team. They liked the thematic nature of the teams, like the Breakneck Betties and the Guns and Rollers. And so they enjoyed that kind of stuff. I don't think a lot of people ranked very high the really kind of tongue-in-cheek things that happened. And then, the taste of the audience, it evolved. It evolved to people being like, oh, I want my team to win. Right? So they were starting to care less about, the kind of fake things that were added in. And they started caring more about, oh, my team is dominating this year. They're doing so good. Look at this new player they've got. They're really kind of learning the strategy, this and that. So a lot of it comes down to, are we listening to the people who are spending their hard-earned cash on a ticket? And then in 2009, like 2008, like I think we all finished the year with like $5 in the bank. In 2009, we did a huge survey. We moved out of playing in a big arena and we started playing at our facility, which we still play at because we love it. It's really intimate and awesome. And so we moved into this 500-person facility. And so we said, okay, we're going to pack this place with 500 people. Let's get our biggest, baddest, diehard fans and let's give them what they want.
I've seen it described in various places as a contact sport for women. Would you agree with that?
Very much so. As far as the contact sport part of it, it is full contact. And I mean, the version that we do is women, girls, and gender-expansive individuals. In the beginning, it was, for women, and then we've definitely expanded because Derby is a really inclusive environment. We wanted to be gender inclusive to those that felt women's derby was the place for them.
For those who've never seen roller derby, or at least modern roller derby, can you explain the basics of the game?
Sure. Modern roller derby is played on a flat surface. It is basically an oval, and the oval is about 10 feet wide at any given point. And you're going to have 5 players from each team on the track at a given time. Each team has 1 jammer and 4 blockers. And the point of the game is the jammers score 1 point by passing members of the opposing team. And they can only score on a single person 1 time per pass. So, for example, if I'm fighting my way through the pack and I get knocked out of bounds and have to go back and, fight my way through again, I don't get points additionally on the people I've already passed. So it really behooves a jammer to get through on your first try. But the blockers are playing offense and defense simultaneously. And so what that means is, as a blocker, I'm going to be trying to help my jammer get through as smoothly as possible while stopping the other team's jammer. Really, it looks like a swirling ball of chaos the first few times you watch it. So you really got to kind of tune your eyes in to be able to like refocus on the jammer and see where they're at. And then once you learn how to watch the jammers fighting their way through, then you can really start picking up on some of the nuance of the strategy that the blockers are executing.
And talk to me a little bit about what contact is allowed and what contact is not allowed.
What contact is allowed and not allowed is a great question because it is inherently dangerous to tackle people while wearing roller skates. So there are a lot of rules, and the rules largely come down to making it a safer game. You can hit people along, the sides of their body, in the front of their body, in their chest. You cannot hit people in their head, in their back, or like kicking their feet out from underneath them. So really, most of the rules about kind of contact zones come down to where could you hit somebody safely and it's not going to be something they didn't see coming. You don't see it coming all the time, I will promise you, because people come at you hard and quick and you're looking other places.
You make it sound like so much fun to go knock around your friends. Why is that? It's a bit of a conundrum though when you think about I'm going to go do this rough and tumble sport, but I'm going to do it with my friends.
Oh no, I mean it's wonderful. Like I think one of the beautiful parts about roller derby is that it's so much about community, and you do spend so much time actually playing against your own teammates that it really teaches you one of the best things about sport, which is you can really give it your all against somebody and knock into them on the track, but then when you step off the track, your friends, your teammates, your compadres. I think the big thing is there's just the thing about playing any kind of sport where you get on the track and you want to do your very best. And when you land a really good block against somebody, whether they're your opponent or, your best friend, that feeling of, oh, I just did something wonderful is just such a charge that I think that you end up having that like throughout the game with your friends. I may land a huge block on a friend of mine and they go flying, and in the moment they're like, damn it. But at the same time, they also know that same feeling of when you take somebody out, how good it feels, assuming that they don't get hurt.
Talk to me about the choice that you made for the Rose City Rollers to go with flat track versus some of the banked tracks that are out there.
So when in 2005, I think 26 or 28 leagues around the U.S. got together and formed the Women's Flat Track Derby Association. So in that hotel room in Chicago in 2005, we kind of made the conscious decision that while there was, I believe, a bank track in Texas and a bank track in Arizona, we were like, if we really want this to be an inclusive thing, let's do it on flat track. It's also going to give us a lot more competitors. Being able to have a flat track was a lot more accessible for a lot of people. And so I think that's kind of where the reason that flat track is so much more prevalent.
And so is it the accessibility of the flat track that makes it more inclusive? Is that what you mean?
Oh, definitely. I mean, If you look at leagues who pop up, they don't pop up and have their own facility and have a sport court floor and a permanently taped down track. A lot of them are going to be coming in and, taping down a track inside of a vacant warehouse that they only have access to for a couple hours, each night of the week, or doing it in a roller rink between session times, or skating outside on, a hockey flat surface where they are going to use chalk to make the track. So really, the fact that, the diagrams are all online and somebody could draw out a track and essentially play derby, like that's accessibility.
So if you have a parking lot, a box of chalk, and a group of friends with skates, you could basically do this?
Yeah, that's kind of like the roots of where it all started.
Do you know more about that history of where it all started that goes back farther than what we talked about?
Oh yeah, it started in 1930 by Leo Seltzer here in Portland, actually, and it was a skate race. It largely was like kind of like a relay that went on for a long, long time. And the interesting thing is that it kind of came and went like every 20 years. So the roller derby was big in the 30s, and then it kind of died down in the 40s, and then it came back in the 50s, and then it died down in the 60s, and then it came back in the 70s. It started as people basically kind of seeing who could skate like the fastest, the longest type of thing, and then it started evolving into the derby that we saw in the 70s, which was more about, the jammer gets a point for passing numbers to the opposing team, and we're whipping people through the crowd. it was also like, it was crazy. Like they would play in huge arenas. I've seen photos and it's just unbelievable.
Let's talk a little bit about your decision to lead the league. So you were part of its creation, but were you always in a leadership role?
One day I was at work and I worked at Davis Helen Advertising. And I remember thinking to myself, you know, like getting the data of our membership organized and making sure that we're maintaining like contact lists and all that kind of stuff, and that we start organizing people paying dues so that we could rent spaces to practice, and getting some merch made and things like that. I was like, there's a lot of these kind of things that just they need to be kept going because this matters to people. I think we were probably at about like 80 people at that time. And it was like, this is mattering to people. And if it's mattering to people, I need to make sure that it keeps going, that it's, consistent. And I think that was really kind of the day that I, took a big step towards becoming the executive director of the Rose City Rollers. It was identifying how much Derby meant to the people that were participating and going, I don't want to let this fail because I see that love and that spark in their eyes.
Did you make a direct shift from your position in advertising to this, or was there a transition where you did both?
From '04 to '06, I still worked at the ad agency and was doing this like every spare moment of my life. And it was when we were actually decided that we were going to rent our own facility on the property of Oaks Amusement Park. That was the time when my board was like, okay, we need to hire Rocket Mean to do this, to manage the league as we take on, having a monthly mortgage or a lease payment. It really wasn't a popular thing for leagues to be hiring people. I think a lot of the kind of, DIY nature of Derby lent itself to people not putting a lot of emphasis on treating Derby leagues like a business, which I think is part of the thing that's kind of held Derby back. If you look at Rose City, I have 8 staff under me, which I have more staff than the international governing body has, I believe. A lot of leagues have 1 employee. It's not treated like a business too often.
And so when you take this more professional stance, what do you think the impacts are?
Well, I think the impacts that you have when you take a more professional approach to roller derby is you have the organizational stability. You have the ability to do things like strategic planning. Where do we want to be in a year, 3 years? Okay, what are all the pieces that we need to get us there? Where are the places that we're going to need to expand our organization, and what resources do we need to make that happen? How do we build in some safety nets? Okay, how do we get to having 6 months operating expenses in the bank at all time? How do we look at bringing together the right people into the conversations to create consistent benefit across the entire program? Like, so for example, how do you make sure that your recreational program, your junior program, and your adult competitive program are all getting what they need? How do I make this, built for success right now and built for success in the future?
Can you give us a little better sense of scale? I think there may be a misconception that this is, a couple dozen people.
So Rose City Rollers is 17 teams and programs made up of typically 400 to 500 skaters, typically going to have around 800 volunteers. So yeah, I mean, we're big. Like, we run 48 hours a week of practice time. Our all-star adult team are 4-time reigning world champs. It's fairly huge. I know at one point I think we hit like 600 skaters. At that point, it feels a bit big, because for me, I'd rather have in our league the people who are, monthly dues paying members getting a great experience out of it and kind of getting what they need. So, I mean, I don't have a sweet spot as far as numbers. I just want to know that my skaters are all having a great time.
How do you think the league impacts the greater community?
For me, I look at it kind of in chunks. If I look at the kids, the 7 to 12-year-olds that are playing derby, right? All of a sudden we have these young people who are hearing the message of working as a team is great. We have young people who are being told, be your wacky little self, like, let out your creative side, like, have a great time, be young, create friendships with people who are, not in your school class, but are from, different parts of the city. So we get to me, that's putting, fairly friendly, well-adjusted kids out into the community who, believe in giving back and who believe in having community and believe in having a great time and having fun. I think anything that we can do to make kids ingrained in kids that sports are fun is great for us. When it comes to teenagers, like I love the fact that the teenagers get onto the track with one another and they are being taught you don't have to be in an adversarial relationship with every other person who's a teen near you. Learn that you can be against somebody in a game and then be buddies with them off the track. Having the ability to go, okay, I can rely on somebody else. I don't have to do this myself. I can, rely on my community. I think that with teenagers, it's whatever we can do to keep teenagers moving and being happy and having, people to rely on during their teen years. It's just so important because it's such a hard time, and anything we can do to improve that is great. When we look at like a lot of the adults that come to roller derby, a lot of them have never played sports before. And so they've never had that team connection. A lot of them come to derby, they haven't had that sense of self-confidence that comes from your body doing something new and different. And so all of a sudden we have people that are like, oh my gosh, I met my best friends at roller derby. I learned how to step into a community and try something new, right? So they get that kind of bravery that then they take out into the community. They learn that derby all over the world is done by volunteers participating. They take that sense of philanthropy out into the world and they're like, okay, well, volunteering is just a normal thing. I like to think that derby is like a gateway drug for volunteering because, people come to it and we're like, no, everybody does volunteering. It's, what you do.
So you send out into the world these, 500 people who are brave, confident, have a volunteering spirit.
Yes.
Does the league itself do volunteer projects beyond development?
The league does a lot of different community engagement type things. So, for example, with Active Children Portland, we're going to be putting on free after-school programming. And so what we'll do is we'll come in with our skate mobile and our coaches, and we're going to teach roller skating. And then if some of their participants want to learn derby, then we'll do that. So we're going to do like sessions there. We have different community partners like Brown Girl Rise, where they do community activities for Black and brown girls in the Portland community. We're very interested in letting these organizations kind of say how they want us to be, how they want us to support them. No, you tell us what you want to do and we'll just show up and bring our fun. We usually look for things that have good mission fit and whose values align with ours. Like, once you kind of instill in your membership of, your membership that is hundreds and hundreds of people deep, that giving back is, something that really matters to us, then it's not a strange thing when we're, saying, oh, by the way, let's support these other organizations that, that are near and dear to our hearts.
It's interesting that earlier in the conversation, we talked about the evolution of the point of view from women's contact sport to including girls and gender expansive individuals. And then you also talk about some of the volunteer work or community building work that you're doing with diverse populations. How diverse is the league right now?
The league is not hugely diverse right now, nor is the sport of roller derby. It is a fairly white sport. Gender diversity, I think most leagues around the world are fairly diverse. But yeah, as far as, racial diversity, we're just not there. And it's not just a matter of, going out and recruiting people of color. It's really about, if our sport is a super white sport, then why is it that? Why do people of color not feel that this is a welcoming place or a place they belong? So right now, both on, an international level and on a local level, we're all kind of taking the time to go, okay, well, what is it about roller derby? And for me, also Rose City Rollers that we need to work on. And so, we've set up a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. We've hired a consultant. We've gone through a self-assessment and kind of prioritize the work that we need to do. Some stuff is policy work. Some stuff is looking at how do we create, safe spaces, safe events. How do we look at our culture and go, okay, what are the ugly parts of our culture that would make somebody from a marginalized community feel unwelcome or unsafe? So we're in the thick of all of that work right now. It's fairly uncomfortable, and which it should be. I'm a white chick in my 40s. Like, it should be fairly uncomfortable to me. But I'm happy that we are diving into the work and that we're doing it, and that, and it's not something that I ever see as being done. It's going to be something where we keep evolving ourselves.
What would you say was the biggest change for you? The entry into roller derby at all in the early days, or the transition into executive management?
So rolling from the ad agency into running Derby, I mean, that was a change because I had never run a nonprofit. I had never been, I'd never run a company. But in those early days, like there was so much hustle and like everything was changing every day. All kind of felt like it fell into the realm of building something from the ground up, right? So it was just super exciting every day. And it felt like basically I was running a marathon for a few years straight. One of the bigger changes was actually kind of evolving into a manager of people, and the person that helps chart the course for a business. That really feels like the place that I was very nervous about. And I actually went and sought out an executive coach to help me with, okay, well, if I'm going to have a bunch of employees below me, how do I make sure that we're all kind of staying on track with working? How do I make sure they're all getting what they need? And, how do I kind of, do the work to help bring out the very best in these people that we're hiring, and that they feel supported and they feel like they have a leader that they can come to and ask questions of, and that, we're all in this working equally as hard together. That was a big change.
Are there any
You know,
lessons that you learned on the track that you're applying to your role in executive management?
yeah, I think that one of the big lessons that you learn on the track that is totally applicable to management is really trusting the people around you. Trusting that we're all there for the same reasons and that we all want to do our very best. But at the same time, also looking around and going, okay, well, who is it that could really use that extra boost right now? Like, does this person over here need a pep talk? Getting in tune with the people that are around you and that are on your team.
So, talk to me a little bit about how your team of professional managers works to plan strategically for the future of the organization.
Well, I think as far as strategic planning goes, it's actually been something that we implemented very early on. You have to step back and go, okay, I want to get from here to there in X amount of time, and then breaking down, okay, what are the things that are going to get us there? For me, in the beginning, it was as simple as going through a SWOT analysis and realizing the impact of identifying our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. If we say what are the three things on here that if we impacted them, they would have the biggest positive impact on our organization. Doing that kind of a thing and really getting ourselves into the habit and going, okay, now we've set some goals. They're specific, they're measurable, they're time bound. We have owners for them and things like that. And we really use goal setting to kind of drive decision making. It's one of those things that I'm always telling leagues to do is that, you have to be able to identify what are the things that are going to really help move you forward, and what are the risks you really need to mitigate. So I feel lucky that my organization has always been really supportive of us doing that kind of strategic work on a regular basis.
It's smart because and it's so interesting because I don't think that an average person would think that an organization would be so strategic. You expect it of more commonplace businesses, but you don't necessarily expect it of something like a roller derby league.
No, people are
I'm
always
sorry, I don't
shocked.
mean to insult you,
No, I'm
because
not insulted in the
you're
slightest.
incredibly strategic and incredibly successful, and it's just so behind the scenes.
Yeah, it is. It's not something that even a lot of businesses do. If I'm supposed to be steering the ship, I need to know how to chart the course, and then how to get everybody that's with me to go, oh yeah, that's where we want to go.
Right.
Let's do it. I'll do my part to get us there.
Are you still competing now?
No, I retired in '09. The early years of Derby, like we really played some serious tackle Derby, and I just kept breaking things. And then it also became really difficult to do my job and have people not second guess decisions I was making because they thought that it was to positively impact my team. It's second nature. I think that people are gonna, be skeptical of your leadership if you could potentially be creating benefit for you and yours.
And so by retiring, you were able to draw a line between those things?
Yes. And then on top of that, playing the game with people, it was just really difficult.
Do you still skate for fun?
Yeah. Yeah.
What,
I don't play derby for fun. I leave that to
when was the last time you skated for fun?
a couple of weeks ago. We had a roller disco on the rooftop of Lloyd Center. And me and a couple of the alumni were out there skating and having a good time.
So I want to close just by asking you what advice you have for others. And I guess I'd like to take this from the context of those who might be interested in participating in roller derby. What advice do you have for them?
I think for those who are interested in participating in roller derby, I wouldn't limit your scope to just skating. I would look at derby as just an amazing, kind of as a sport, but also as a community, as a place that you can volunteer. Because so many people come to derby, they don't even know that they're looking for community, but that's really what they're looking for. If the skating itself works for you, get in there, try it out. If the volunteering to help, make the sport there for other people is your jam, do that. If you want to learn to coach, do that. Derby is a really kind of a choose your own adventure. So, I think that most derby leagues around the world are really welcoming spaces, and they always need help. So we're always looking for volunteers. We're always looking for new skaters. So yeah, I think that the big thing is people just to, go to things, talk to people. If you ever see somebody who is a derby person, feel free to walk up to them and ask them questions about derby. I promise you, they will tell you about derby and probably be very excited, unless they're in the airport trying to make a flight.
Thank you for joining us today on Digging Deep, True Stories of Big Change. I'm your host, Kelly Styring, founder and principal researcher from Insight Farm. At Insight Farm, we help companies make their products better through conversation and connection with consumers, often told as stories like the one you've heard today. If you'd like us to help you with consumer research, or if you'd like to participate in this podcast and tell your story, reach out at www.insightfarm.com. We look forward to the conversation.